I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks to the Buckley program. Thanks for everyone who's in attendance. By way of introduction, I'm a law student. So, of course, I'm thinking about one thing, which is student debt. And obviously, the Buckley program wants you to think a lot about it, too, because we have two presentations about student debt. They actually match perfectly, because while Elliot talked about a back-end solution, I have a front-end solution, which means I want to talk about underwater basket weaving. So, Thomas Cooley Law School is the law school that's attached to Western Michigan University. It's in Lansing. And by many indicators, Cooley Law School is a perfectly normal place. It's the largest law school in the country. The tuition is the same amount as any other law school, top law schools like Yale and Berkeley. And the government will loan you the full cost of attendance at really attractive terms, at 5%. So in a functioning market, all of these things should tell you that Cooley Law School is a solid investment. But we don't have a functional market. And what turns out to be true is the opposite. Cooley Law School is actually a terrifying debt trap. 75% of its graduates don't get a legal job a year out of graduation. 50% don't get any job at all. And the bar passage rate is abysmal. And the average graduate has $122,000 in average debt. So what we can conclude is that Thomas Cooley Law School is actively harming every single student that passes through its doors. Leading us to our next question, which is, why does Cooley Law School exist? And the reason why it exists is because of terrible government policies in the form of a student loan program from the federal government in which basically every incentive is misaligned. So to begin thinking about how these incentives are misaligned, it's helpful to imagine if the same rules that govern the federal loan program were in place for a government mortgage policy. So let's imagine that the government wanted to incentivize homeownership so much that they made a huge pot of money available to any borrower to buy any house at a flat, attractive interest rate. No appraisal, no questions asked, no nothing. Yeah, right. It didn't end up working out that well, though. There's additional factors, though. Let's imagine further that by law, these loans aren't dischargeable in bankruptcy, so they're with you for life. And let's further imagine that by law, data can't be collected on individual borrower outcomes. So we have no guide for what works and what doesn't, what kinds of houses are good investments and what kinds of houses are bad investments. So for people coming into the program, they don't know what to do. As you may have picked up on, we unfortunately do have this policy. It's no longer the mortgage policy. It's the federal student loan policy. The federal system makes a huge pot of money available at attractive terms to any borrower for any degree, and it covers more than 90% of all student lending, totaling $1.5 trillion. Elliot already talked to you about a lot of the scary statistics that program entails. So let's look at a quote from a parent that interacted with this system, a mother that borrowed under the Parent Plus program, which allows parents to take out federal loans at attractive terms up to the full cost of attendance. She said, "You're at your wit's end. You want to help your kid, and this fairy princess appears in your computer and says, 'Want some money?' You're like, 'Bingo. It's more than you can afford, but damn it, education is important, right?' Then 4 years later, you can't believe how much you owe." So when we start hearing about fairy princesses offering free money, our alarm bells should start going off, because we have a name for lenders that give free money to people who can't pay it back. And they're called predatory lenders. And it's what the federal government is engaged in. The core problem, I think, has three components. The first is that the federal government will loan students and parents money for any degree at the same terms. That means that if I'm borrowing money to get a computer science degree from MIT, I'm borrowing at the exact same low interest rate as someone borrowing to get a communications degree from the University of Phoenix, or indeed an underwater basket weaving degree, or a marginalization studies degree. Schools then have no incentive to provide high-value degrees. This massive pot of federal money turns schools into rent seekers. They have no incentive because they have no skin in the game if their students default. They don't need to provide good degrees because the students aren't defaulting on the school, they're defaulting on the taxpayers that put up the money for the federal loans. So the school concentrates on getting people in the door with upfront marketing glitz, rock climbing walls, lazy rivers, and if the students turn out to not really learn that much and can't use anything with the degree that they took out all that money for, school's fine. You guys, though, me, taxpayers, we're not so fine. And students are certainly not fine. Students don't have enough information to navigate this dysfunctional market. They can't tell what degrees are high value and which degrees are low value. And that decision is made all the more difficult because they're bombarded with a lot of cultural messages about following your passion at all costs. And they learn when they graduate that that's actually not true, that following your passion can often come with very serious costs, but the federal government, by making all this money available up front, hides the ball about what those costs are. So this system, this pretty poorly designed system, leads to a lot of pretty negative outcomes. The first is higher tuition. You can see that tuition has been rising at basically a linear rate since the late 70s. Average tuition is 11.1 times higher in 2015 than in 1980, far outstripping the growth in overall individual consumption and inflation. Again, schools have no incentive to contain costs because the federal government puts up all the money that students need to pay those costs. You might think that maybe students are paying more, but maybe they're getting more for their money. Maybe education has gotten better as it's gotten more expensive. Here again, the opposite is true. So a nationally representative survey of university students conducted by Richard Arum, the chair of sociology at New York University, found that 35% of university students study less than 5 hours per week, which represents a 50% decline in time spent studying since 1960. 45% of university students demonstrate no gain in critical thinking skills as measured by the Collegiate Learning Assessment during their time in university. The reasons for this are pretty clear. The incentives created by that free pot of federal money means that schools are concentrating on treating students as consumers. They want to get them in the door. They want their tuition money. They want those federal loans. And so they put all of their stock in making sure that students are having a good time. Because if they give them something rigorous, their consumers might not be consumers anymore. They might go to another school that looks more fun. So the result is that graduates, despite paying more than ever, are less prepared than ever. Which brings us to our next outcome, which is more debt. As tuition has risen, students and parents absorb the costs of those increase, as in those increase in school spending. So schools are adding administration, they're adding bureaucracy, they're adding lazy rivers, they're adding rock climbing walls. And they know that the students are going to have no other choice but to borrow the money to front those costs for the schools. The dangerous thing is that as average student debt has increased so much, the red line, this happens at the same time that earnings, the blue line, are completely flat, which means that this is a totally unsustainable setup. And leads to our next outcome, which is more defaults. You can see here that the rate of default has been increasing pretty steadily for almost 2 decades now. It's now at over 11%, which mirrors exactly the rate of default on mortgage loans on the eve of the subprime crisis in 2008. So there are a lot of really interesting proposals coming out of the left to solve this problem. And they all have one thing in common, which is that they frame the problem in terms of affordability. They think that the problem is that college costs are rising, so it's the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that students have more money to spend on college. They make more money available in terms of aid, in terms of grants, and in terms of increased loan availability. The problem is that this gets the issue completely backwards, because if you make more money available for students to spend on college, college is going to get more expensive. Universities are going to understand that the government is going to give students as much as they need to go to college. So you get this really destructive arms race where colleges raise costs, the federal government puts up more money to meet those costs, and on we go. The people that lose are the students and especially the taxpayers. There was a really interesting study done last year by the New York Fed that amply demonstrated that tuition essentially rises in tandem as federal aid increases. If federal loan availability increases. That dynamic has been going on for a long time, and the result is that taxpayers are bearing a net loss of $170 billion over the next decade from the student loan program. Rather than think about this problem in terms of affordability, we need to think about it in terms of incentives. Because despite the proliferation of really worthless degree programs, college on average remains a good investment. The average college student is going to make more money than a similarly situated student that didn't go to college. So the challenge has to be figuring out how to incentivize more students into high-value degree programs, staying away from the programs that are low value. We want students to be able to identify which degrees are going to leave them underwater, the degrees that they spent more money on than they're actually worth in the marketplace, and move students into those degrees that really allow them to earn a return on their investment. And of course, that also means taxpayers earning a return on their investment. My proposal is pretty simple. It's a proposal on the margins that seeks to improve the incentives in that direction. What I want to do is I want to make federal loan interest rates linked to the 10-year default rate of the borrower's degree program. I want a situation where if a student is borrowing to go into a degree program whose graduates are really successful, there's a lot of labor market demand, and graduates are able to get good-paying jobs with that degree. I want those students to be rewarded, and I want a prospective student looking at their options to say, this degree program I can borrow at 2% to do. This other one, this underwater basket weaving degree program, is asking me to borrow at 10, 15% interest, because if schools are offering degree programs that churn out unemployed graduates and asking the taxpayers to foot that bill, I think that that should be treated as a subprime risk. I think that there should be a giant red flag flashing before a prospective student's eyes saying, this is a bad investment. Think very carefully about what you're doing. I think that the effect of this policy would be threefold, or I think one of three things would happen. If Cooley Law School is facing a situation where they can't get the same number of students to enter their degree because it's so much more expensive to attend Cooley Law School, students see that Cooley Law School's borrowing costs are sky high and they don't want to pay them, Cooley Law School is going to have to make some changes if it wants to keep tuition-paying students. The first option is it can compete on price. You should have picked up that it was pretty weird that Cooley Law School, despite being a terrible quality program, costs exactly the same as Yale Law School. The reason why is that they don't have to compete on price. But in a situation where they're facing an exodus of students who don't want to pay their high borrowing costs, Cooley Law School would be forced to compete on price by lowering tuition to make up for those high borrowing costs. Cooley Law School, if it didn't want to do that, could go a different route. It could improve quality. It could attempt to lower the default rates of its graduates so that more tuition-paying students want to come there. If it can't do one of those things, then it'll close. And the interesting thing is that all three of these outcomes are vast improvements over the status quo, because we either get more market competition leading to lower prices and higher quality, or we eliminate debt traps that ruin the lives of every student that passes through its doors. I think that this plan has three main challenges. The first one is that we need to repeal the 2008 Higher Education Act's ban on unit record systems. What unit record systems do is they link borrower data, individual borrower data, with individual earnings data. They say, okay, this borrower took out this much to attend college, and he entered this degree program, and now he's earning this much. We used to have this plan We used to have this data, but in 2008, the main trade association of nonprofit colleges and universities lobbied to ban it. They talked about privacy, but what they really were scared of is that people would figure out how bad some of their products really are. The second thing is that we need to ensure strong disclosure requirements. This plan only works if students have the ability to make decisions based on the information. We need this information everywhere. We need it in the student loan portal. We need it on college websites, and there's great bipartisan legislation co-sponsored by Marco Rubio mandating that schools disclose that information. There's actually bipartisan legislation calling for this repeal too, so both options are on the table. But stickiest of all, we need to change our notion of what college is for. The main kind of critique I get when I talk about this plan with people is they say, don't you think there should be theater majors? Don't you think that some degree programs carry value that might not be represented in the form of a high-paying job? And my answer is that, of course, I think that there should be theater majors, but not more than the theater industry can hire. Right now, what the federal government does is it says, here, kid, take all this money, follow your dreams. What happens to you afterwards isn't our problem. They hide the ball. And I think that rather than kind of hopping students up on baby boomer platitudes about following your heart at all costs, we give them information about the costs up front so that they can make good decisions that allow them to retain their upward mobility rather than being saddled with mountains of debt, being able to get married, buy homes, take risks, start jobs, and get out from under an insane system. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nicholas. And please know, as a father of two children in college right now, I'm sympathetic. And I'd also like to note that there no longer is a major in underwater basket weaving, but there is a major out there now in the exploitation of underwater basket weavers in Latin America.
Very serious issue.
Here's my question. Let's go back to the theme of unintended consequences. What does this do to the field of journalism? What does this do to the field of pure mathematics, or to the field of teachers or historians? They'll be paying a higher interest rate, effectively.
So let's talk about that. So I got a liberal arts degree, and I feel that I benefited immensely from that liberal arts degree, because the thing that we always say about the liberal arts is that the liberal arts teach us how to think. And I think that's totally true. But there's also a lot of really sloppy thinking about the liberal arts. And so if I went to a good liberal arts program and I was really taught how to think, or a good journalism program, or a good history program, and I was really taught how to think, the payoff for that would be that I could get a job that enables me to use those skills. Because if I'm having trouble getting a job, then whatever benefits that liberal arts program was supposed to transmit about teaching me how to think is now going to be massively canceled out by the fact that I am struggling to survive. The good liberal arts programs that really do teach people how to think, the good history programs, the good journalism programs, those programs are going to be fine. Because if they do a good job, then the students will be able to use the skills they learned to create a career for themselves. The programs that aren't so good at that will get punished, and I think that's okay.
I guess my question, I'm going to take the follow-up, is, but again, to the unintended consequence, doesn't that divert the next Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, or some of them, into a different field?
I think it's okay for more private market principles to be ported into this system and more students allocating into fields for which there is labor market demand. I agree with you that we might end up with less artists, but we also end up with less students struggling under unresolvable amounts of debt. I'm willing to take the payoff of the market sorting more people into areas where there is demand for them.
Let me be the Charles Murray here. Because just a little note, I did look up while you were talking, not that I wasn't paying attention, the Cooley Law School, and 40% of its students are members of minority groups. Most of the students there are part-time, not to defend Cooley. But it gets to another issue. If your premise is that it's job-based outcome, and you link that to a major. Why don't you? What would stop someone from linking it to something else, demographics of some kind, and which leads to an ugly road possibly? So why not give me a discount because I'm Asian, versus anything else?
So I am a law student, and I do have faith in the law, although I'm not yet a lawyer, and maybe that faith will be damaged at some point in the future. And our ability to restrain the people design this proposal in a way that pegs the interest rate to algorithmically the 10-year default rate of a given degree program. There's nothing inherently about a part-time student or a minority student that means that they will be less worthy of a strong, of a low interest rate and a good program, because nurses are a great example. There is so much labor market demand for nurses, and if you want to borrow to become a nurse, you're going to be able to. People become nurses from very deprived backgrounds, and they make great careers for themselves. I see the people that are going to Cooley Law School who also come from deprived backgrounds as having been better off never having gone to Cooley Law School. They should have done something else, but the federal government induced them to make a bad choice. I want those people who are most vulnerable to have incentives to do things that will be most likely to put them on sure footing. I see the government as enabling very irresponsible risk-taking on behalf of the people that went to Cooley Law School.
Let me. Oh, you asked.
Well, okay, my question sort of centers around sort of Charles Murray-esque principles as well. And I guess it has to do a little bit with the idea that there are people who are fortunate enough to go to college without having to borrow for it. And these sort of incentives would not exist for them because they would presumably be able to, take their marginalization studies without any sort of penalty. But my question is, and so when you sort of, I guess one critique from the left would be this perpetuation of that sort of privilege. But another question is, this also, couldn't you get at a lot of the problems here also through better disclosure? I mean, in other words, if we are sort of following the sort of Buckley-esque principle of knowledge as opposed to compulsion, how would you answer that critique, that you were building in an element of compulsion when many of the same desirable ends might be met equally well just through enhanced information?
So I completely agree with you that better disclosure is essential, and that's why I talked about it in my presentation. I think in terms of compulsion, we have to ask who is compulsed exactly, because the free choice of people that the federal government, the free choice of students to do whatever they want is enabled by taxpayers, and the result is that we are in a really difficult fiscal position as a result of enabling those choices. I see this more as applying private loan market principles to a government system such that people wind up being more free on balance. Like, it's all well and good to talk about freedom of choice when you're choosing your degree. That freedom of choice gets canceled out if you made a choice that now constrains your life so dramatically after the fact, having made a bad decision. And I think we should do everything possible to avoid that situation where students are being compelled by their life circumstances, having the government acting as an enabler for those choices. So that's how I deal.
In other words, take what you want and pay for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Time for 2 audience questions, so please wait for a moment.
Sure. Yeah.
What sort of differential are you envisioning in the interest rates to be charged between a relatively worthless degree and a really practical degree like engineering or pre-med?
That I think I would be doing a disservice to this idea if I tried to get into that level of detail. I think that there are some degrees that are essentially riskless, where like coders, just there's no way you're going to be unemployed. There's no way you're going to be an unemployed coder. So I don't want to throw numbers out, but it should be from the level of almost riskless to totally subprime.
Thank you. You don't want to do the thing that was just suggested, but the devil is probably in the details here to a significant degree.
Yeah.
You not only are talking about differentials related to the particular subject, the STEM versus basket weaving. You're talking Harvard versus Cooley.
Yes.
Because at Harvard, basket weaving, if you take the data, almost certainly show people do just fine with life. So they can get low loans at Harvard, but they're going to pay high. And I'm not suggesting that that's inherently evil. I'm suggesting that's what, if you carry this through logically in terms of an economic calculus, it will lead to. And the details will get us to the point where people are going to say, we're back to Murray again. You're taking advantage of people because of who they are. Because of who they are is where they go, and it's where they go as much as it is what they're studying. So it's not a question, it's a comment. Do you want to comment?
Sure. So I agree with you that it's possible that Harvard basket weaving will get better terms than Cooley Law School. You said that you have an intuition that that's probably not evil. I agree with you. I think that the way that I would come out on this is I believe that every person, no matter how deprived their backgrounds are, have the ability to enter a field for which there is labor market demand. So I use nurses as an example. There's no privilege that you need to become a nurse. Anyone can do it. And I want as many people to make choices like that as possible.